Morning. Let's make our way to Proverbs. We are still continuing our study, topical study from the book of Wisdom. Do appreciate all of you coming and joining us in person and online. Just by way of encouragement, I know it is, and it can sometimes be discouraging when there's few of us that come here in person, but I do want to encourage you with the fact that our average attendance during this past year, throughout the year, our Sunday morning service is at an average of 200 people, including the ones that are here in person and the ones who are watching online. So I know that there are times when there are few of us here, but that in no way includes, or that is no way discouraging just because there are so many people that are now also tied with watching and being a part of our services. So our average attendance on Sunday morning last year, including online and in person, was 200. So, and during the months of March, April, and May, the average was 500. So we have had quite a ministry over this last little while, in spite of the fact I have gotten a couple calls, or a call from a number of different people who were curious if we were still having services. So I know that there are some that are assuming that we don't even have services. And so we've had to reassure a number of people that as long as we're able, we're still going to be here and we're still going to be faithful and do that, because most places have not had services over this or the last week, and many of them this week are not having services as well. So we're going to continue on and we're going to do our best to be faithful. And this morning we're in the book of Proverbs, a topical study from the book of Wisdom. And this morning we're going to look at the topic of pride. Proverbs has a lot to say about pride. And the simplest definition of pride is thinking so highly of ourselves that we believe we do not need God. This is a warning about thinking that we can live life and do things without Him. Pride is tied intrinsically to God. And that's the core root, the core issue with pride. It's a belief that I can function without God. And as a result of that, we think we're better than others and that we deserve more than others. If I can function without God, then obviously I'm better than others who maybe use Him as a crutch. So pride always begins with the belief that I don't need God, and then as a result of that, then we think we are better than others and that we deserve more, or we deserve what they have. And that was the original sin. Isaiah 14 deals with Satan's sin, the very beginning, or you could say the first sin. So Isaiah 14, I want to turn over there and read it for you. Isaiah 14, 12 through 15 says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Satan was also known as Lucifer. He was the chiefest created being. And his sin was that he thought he didn't need God. He could be as good as or better than God. And that pride caused his complete and utter downfall. So that's the beginning of pride, and that's how pride starts. It always starts there. I don't need God. And that shows up in all of our lives in a lot of different ways. So Proverbs has a lot to say about pride. The first verse that we're going to turn to in general topics of general kind of principles of pride is from Proverbs 13 and verse 10. This is a verse that we have looked at already. It's one that has come up just recently. It says, "Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom." Basically, if there is conflict between you and someone else, you have pride in your life. There is something that is causing you to think that you don't need God, and that's creating a problem with your relationships with others. The thing that keeps that in check is listening to advice. That keeps your pride from growing out of proportion, from getting away from you, is making sure that you have the attitude of listening to advice. Listening, not believing that you are better than everybody else, but knowing and understanding that you need help with things and that it's going to be wise for you to listen to other perspectives and to listen to advice. So if there's conflict between you and someone else, you have pride in your life. If there is no pride, you don't think you're better than God. Therefore, you're not going to think you're better than everybody else. And there's not going to be that conflict that comes in relationships. Only by pride cometh contention. Then Proverbs 21 and verse 4. It says, "An high look and a proud heart and the plowing of the wicked is sin." Those first two phrases are two different sides of pride. Looking down on others, an high look, thinking that you're better than others, so that you look down on them, and then a proud heart, believing that you are better than others. So you look down on others, you think less of them, but also you believe in your heart that you are better than them. And so it's both sides of pride. Both of them are sin. So he just kind of states it matter-of-factly so that we can get that out in the open and understand pride is sin. Statement of fact. Pride is sin. When you look down on others, when you think they're worse than you, or when you think that you are better than others. It's two sides. They're very similar. Both of them are sin. Then 2 verses later, in the same section here, it says, "The getting of treasure by a lying tongue is a vanity tossed to and fro of them that seek death." Though the word pride itself is not mentioned, the verse in this section is talking about taking advantage of others, and that in its essence is pride. You believe that you should have something, or you believe that your goals are better than others, and it doesn't matter who you step on to get there. At its very core, it's all about pride. So even though the word pride is not mentioned here, when you take advantage of someone, that's where that's coming from. I am better than, or what I am doing is better than what somebody else is doing. Therefore, it's okay for me to step on them. It's okay for me to take advantage of them, to pull one over on them, because my motives, my whatever I'm doing, is better. And doing that, getting things for yourself by taking advantage of others, getting of treasure by a lying tongue, deceiving others to get what you need, it's like playing ball with death. It's like going outside and playing catch with death. That's a very vivid illustration. At its core, it's about pride. Taking advantage of others for your benefit, that's pride, and it's like tossing a ball back and forth with death. Eventually, don't know when, you're flirting with death. So it's a very serious thing. It's a very common thing. At its root is that we don't need God, and it is just sin. Now Proverbs 25, verse 27. Said, "It is not good to eat much honey, so for men to search for their own glory is not glory." Again, this is a verse that we've looked at before. and it's wanting to increase your status over others, wanting to be just a little bit higher than, or to be significantly higher than others, that will only lead to trouble. It's an overindulgence that doesn't fit. You're trying to make yourself better, but you're just going to inherit more and more problems, like eating too much honey. It's good, but if you eat too much of it, it starts to have negative impacts on you. So pride, in the same way, looking after your own pride and wanting to increase your status, starts to have negative impact on you. Proverbs also tells us that there are some things that go along with pride. It has some partners. And the first one is in Proverbs 11 and verse 2. Proverbs 11:2, it says, "When pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly is wisdom." One of the things that comes right along with pride, there's first pride, but then right after that, following along in its wake, is shame. Shame comes on the heels of pride. When you want to think more highly of yourself, when you want yourself to be increased, you only succeed in destroying your own self-worth. And this isn't talking about, you're going to, when you're trying to get ahead at work using lying and deceit, you're going to lose your job. That's not what it's talking about. This is talking about how we think of ourselves. This is mental. This is my self-worth and how I think of myself. That's what shame is. Shame is not something outward, it's something that I deal with. When you have pride, it's a hard issue, thinking you don't need God. That hard issue translates not in making you feel better about yourself, but it translates into destroying your own self-worth. So pride at its core wants itself to feel like and to think that it's better. But one of the partners of pride is shame. So instead of succeeding in making yourself feel better by lording it over others, as you take advantage of others and as you think that way, it destroys actually how you feel about yourself. It messes with and it destroys your own thinking, and it brings shame. When you think more highly of yourself, you only succeed in destroying your own self-worth. So it's a self-defeating kind of thing, because along with that pride comes shame, right on its heels. Then Proverbs 14 and verse 3 is the next one. It says, "In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them." A foolish person, the definition of a fool, is someone who does not want God around. They don't want to think of God. They don't want to think or entertain thoughts about Him. And pride is the originating point for that. So foolishness, a lack of being able to think with common sense, being able to make good decisions, it's just foolishness. It's not wanting anything to do with God. At its core, it's pride. That's what pride is. It's foolishness. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride. So those two things are tied together. Pride is partnered with shame, and it's partnered with foolishness. They go hand in hand. Then one other thing that is tied, that Proverbs says is tied directly to pride, is in Proverbs 21 and verse 24. It says, "Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath." The basic description here is of someone who mocks others, who thinks so little of them that he mocks them. And it's describing the the origination of mocking, where it comes from in your heart, is from pride that reveals itself in anger. So that's how this flows together. It starts with pride, as most things do. And when pride has anger added in, it shows up in mocking. Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath. People are different, and we interact with things, and it looks different in every person. But when a person has anger issues with pride, mocking is one of the most visible ways that comes out. So when you see someone who mocks others, pride and anger is probably the core of what they're dealing with. Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath. The best that a proud, angry person can do is just to be a mocker. That's the best that they're going to be when they have proud anger that they're dealing with. So that's the combination. When pride and anger partner up together, the combination shows up in mocking. And then Proverbs 15:25. One of the things that Proverbs points out in a number of different places is just how much God does not appreciate pride. Proverbs 15:25, it says, "The Lord will destroy the house of the proud, but he will establish the border of the widow." God hates pride. We're going to see in the next verse that it actually turns God's stomach. He just hates pride. People that think they can live without him, because that is so untrue. You're living in a foolish world to think that you don't need God. And God hates it because it motivates so much wickedness. And it is sin. And God puts himself in a position against pride. Because here, what is being described is that he will destroy not only the person, but also their possessions. Pride is so damaging that in order to deal with it, God will destroy that person and also their possessions. This is the attitude that God takes against those who are filled with pride. The Lord will destroy the house of the proud, but he will establish the border of the widow. Pride is a very, very dangerous sin, because it can seep into and just destroy the other areas of our lives. And God deals with it very severely, thinks of it very severely. And then Proverbs 16:5, it's on the same page for me. It says, "Everyone that is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished." A proud person turns God's stomach. Literally makes him want to puke when he sees somebody who is so full of themselves that they look down on others and want nothing to do with him. A proud person literally turns God's stomach, makes him sick. Then the final category of verses here in Proverbs are 3 verses that talk about what pride actually does to a person that has it. Pride self-destructs. Proverbs 16:18. The very well-known verse that most people generally misquote, "Pride goes before a fall." It's "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." So it's very close to what most people quote. But the very key that we have to understand is that pride will lead to your own downfall. It will trip you up, and it will cause you to fall. Pride is very, very, very damaging. And it's an attempt to want better for you than anyone else. Thinks you don't need God, therefore my opinion of myself should be higher than everybody else's. I should be higher than anybody else. At its core, it wants to be higher. But what pride actually does is trip you up, cause you to fall lower. So pride self-destructs. A person who is full of pride always is going to trip up, is going to fall. There may be temporary benefits to wanting and to taking advantage of others, but at its very core, the end result of pride is that it leaves you lower. It aims lower. And then Proverbs 18:12, the next one, it expands on that. Proverbs 18:12, it says, "Before destruction, the heart of a man is haughty, and before honor is humility." As I said, the end result of pride. There can be temporary benefits. A lot of sins have temporary benefits. But the end result of pride is destruction, complete and utter destruction. And right before that comes, that road, it's through pride. So the question is, you can have pride now and destruction later, or you can have humility now and honor later. Those are the two options. But as you make decisions about how you're going to interact, how you're going to think of others, how you're going to think of yourself, you need to keep both of those things in mind. You can have pride now and destruction later, or you can have humility now and honor later. These are the end results of both of those two ways of thinking. One submits and understands that it needs God. It's not about thinking of yourself as lower than other people. It's about submitting yourself to God, knowing that you need Him. And then there's pride, thinking that you don't need God, and that will naturally give you a desire to want to be higher than others. And that's the end result of both of those two ways of thinking. Pride now, destruction later, or humility now, and honor later. Then the last verse that we'll look at this morning is Proverbs 29:23. It says, "A man's pride shall bring him low, but honor shall uphold the humble in spirit." So this is what we've been talking about. Pride seeks to raise itself up, but will only succeed in being brought low. Walvoord, in his commentary, I wrote down, it says, "Ironically, pride, by which a person seeks to elevate himself, actually results in his being brought low, whereas one who is lowly, who is of lowly spirit, is elevated by others to a position of honor. God hates pride because it influences a person to live independently of Him." When you separate yourself from God, when you want to cut the tie between you and God, and that's what pride is, then you drift down naturally. It'll make you think that you're better, but your course is down. When you understand, when you put yourself lower, when you submit yourself to the scriptures, when you submit yourself to God, when you place yourself there, that course naturally aims up. So there are moments along the way when pride can have benefits, and it can look like, man, that person is so proud and they seem to be succeeding. But the end result of those paths, we know where they're going to end up. One ends down, the other aims up. Pride, at its very core, is cutting the tie to God, thinking, I don't need Him. Humility is understanding how much you need Him. Again, it's not about others. Humility or pride exhibits in your relationship with others, but humility is not, I am worse than others. It's, I need God. That's the core difference between pride and humility. So I'll leave you with the final quote, as I often do. The aim of the book is to help us acquire and apply God's wisdom to the decisions and activities of daily life. God wants to give you the tools that you need to succeed. It is one of the greatest examples of God's love for us. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.